On April 16th, Impact Wrestling had their big Rebellion event up in Toronto, and we crowned not one but two world champions. Not only did Deonna Purrazzo win the Knockouts World Championship once again, but the Impact World Championship was won by the gentleman joining me on the Vaqueros Cafe and Cantina Hotline. He is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. He is a 10-year veteran of the Wrestling Wars, and he is the new Impact Wrestling World Champion. It is Steve Maclin. Follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Steve Maclin. Steve, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for plugging my socials.
No problem. No problem. It's so you've been world champion for all of a week.
Yep.
Talk about just the emotion of winning the world title. You were up against Kushida, who has won titles all over the globe. So I know it was a great match and up against a very worthy competitor. But just talk about the emotions of winning that world championship in Toronto.
Meant everything. It was a long road getting there. The cliche of hard work pays off, but it did. And ever since I touched ground in Impact Wrestling 2 years ago, I've hit the ground running. I even said the other night on Impact on Access that I kicked the doors in once I got here, and I made it my goal to become the Impact World Champion, and I did just that. So to say it was a crowning moment, a good achievement for me in Toronto at Rebellion and beating Kushida, who is one hell of a competitor, one tough SOB. I'm very proud of it.
As well you should be. You just mentioned 10 years in wrestling. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned over these 10 years about yourself and about you as a professional wrestler?
Patience. Patience is key, and you being a veteran as well, hurry up and wait is always the thing. You get where you need to get to, you got to do your job as quick as possible, and you make it to the next town. And that's always the thing, is you're just waiting your time, you're buying your time. And once you get those opportunities, and again, patience for those opportunities, and you get those opportunities and you take the ball and you run with it as much as you can and you try to knock it out of the park.
Yeah, it's you're right. And patience, they say patience is a virtue. Not only is it a virtue, but it is so important in life, not just in wrestling or broadcast, but in life itself. As a Marine veteran, you did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Is there something from your time in the Middle East that sticks with you today?
I miss it every day. It's a weird feeling. Me and my buddies always text and talk like, oh, today I miss Afghanistan, or I miss this part, because I was with 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. I was weapons company. I was an 0331 machine gunner. And it's funny how just the camaraderie you still have there is very similar to pro wrestling. So once you share the ring with somebody, it's very similar to sharing on deployment and combat with brothers. So it's just that's probably what I take the most with me, is just enjoying the most out of the guys that I work with and the guys that I served with.
Yeah, in fact, before we started, I was saying about, I was in the Army way back in the, late 80s, but, 30, 35 plus years later, there are still people that I was stationed with, whether it was in language school or in Hawaii or whatever, that I stay in contact with. And you're right, there is a bond there. And you see that in all of pro sports, NFL, the guys that go through the go on the gridiron. You hear about the biggest thing they miss is that locker room camaraderie. I suspect that's the same way, and that's what you enjoy probably just about as much as anything in that Impact locker room.
Yeah, it's missing the barracks life. At Camp Lejeune, where I was stationed, it's just you live every day together and you do the grind, and you're just embracing the suck, as they say, of just going through that grind day in and day out. And it's the same in wrestling, and that's the best part about it. And I think that's one thing too, as well, as I appreciate it more now when I'm in the moment of hanging out with the guys in the locker room compared to when I was in the Marine Corps, because you don't know when that's it. You don't know when it's over, and it's every day could be your last. And it's the same in pro wrestling, where it could be one match that could end your career and everything we do. So you appreciate the moments that you're out there.
Yeah, I imagine. But one of the things doing research, I saw that you are finishing up your bachelor's degree in psychology with a focus on mental health. How close are you to finishing that degree?
About another year left.
Okay.
Taking my time with it, just slowly and surely. I'm not the most tech savvy person, especially on the computer. So I'm enjoying it. With the focus in mental health, I really wanted to focus in on that just because of dealing with my buddies and myself with PTSD
Mm-hmm.
and overall mental health. And even now in pro wrestling in general in life, mental health is a big issue. And I wanted to really know more about it. And when I was let go from my former company, I was all right. What can I do outside of wrestling that would benefit me, but also benefit others that I can make a living in? And I looked into the VA and I was looking into social working and counseling. It's like, how can I get into this? Because a lot of times I've gone to the VA, a lot of the people I talk to are just civilians. They've never served, they've never been in any situation of combat. So it's like, okay, well, why can't I do that? Because then I can relate a lot more and I can be that lending voice, whether I can relate to something or I can give you an advice of my situations where I've been through. So that's kind of why I focused in on mental health and psychology.
It's kind of ironic. I worked a long time with licensing of substance abuse counselors, and a lot of what goes into becoming licensed as a chemical dependency counselor in Texas, it goes to there are quite a few that are recovering addicts. So again, it's kind of what you were talking about. You're talking from the experience, and it's so important. And like you mentioned, between your days in the Marine Corps and now in wrestling, mental health is such a key factor in what you do day to day, and so it's admirable that you're going in that route. Is this something that you could look to once you finally decide to step away from the ring?
Possibly. I just also know that it's broadening my mind to just knowing more about mental health and psychology and understanding people and being more acceptive and not judging a book by its cover in ways. And it's just, I want to be able to do that so that eventually, once I have children, I can instill that in them to where we live in this world where so much is just changing day in and day out with acceptance. And it's just figuring out ways to understand. And that's why I like to just talk to people. I love to get to know people personally just because it's just, you meet so many people in this world. And for the first time, my recruiter in pro wrestling never lied to me like they did in the military, especially in the Marine Corps. So I get to travel the world and I want to know people. I want to know cultures. I want to understand them. And I want to understand why like certain cultures do this or we do this as Americans. Cause of course we're arrogant Americans. You being a Texan, I'm sure you're an arrogant Texan. So it's just, everybody has their cultures and I want to understand more. And that's the one thing I like to be personal with people and understand them.
I get that, and I agree. I agree totally. It's I get to travel some with in radio, and I go do, for instance, go to Super Bowl City every year for Super Bowl week, and you meet all sorts of folks, fellow broadcasters and other people that are there, and you get to interact with them. And it's really really interesting to hear all those different stories. I mentioned at the top, of course, your wife now, Deanna Perrazzo, also won the Knockouts World title, defeating Jordan Grace. Uh, how cool was it to be winning world titles, the both of you at the same event, on the same night?
Awesome. I was so proud of her, her and Jordan, just for main eventing and the knockouts, just keep killing it and keep pushing the envelope for the women in professional wrestling. And I was just so happy and just something that happened organically where we at some point envisioned each other being world champions together, but never on the same night. And it was just a cool moment to be able to walk through the curtain and just kind of see each other. And she told me to kind of get away just because she was getting ready to go out and she was in her focus and her mindset. But just to be able to lay in bed later that night and just kind of just look at each other without even having to say a word was it was a really cool moment. Never expected it in pro wrestling, and it was good. I'll remember that.
It is. I was lucky enough to talk to her a few months ago, and such a wonderful individual. And you mentioned the knockout division in Impact Wrestling. Look, Impact Wrestling they set the bar for women's wrestling. No matter what anybody else says, it starts with that knockouts division going all the way back to the beginnings, back in the TNA days. So, let me ask you this: has there been any mention of doing any storyline where you and Deanna Are they acknowledge your relationship on the air?
It's been talked about, but it's also if it makes sense. We're both in different directions right now, which creatively that we only want it to make sense. And anything we do, she does, and I, as well as I,
Mm.
anything we do, we want to make sense in this business. So why are we doing this? If it's to come and happen down the road, then so be it. We're open to it, but right now we're both focusing on just being the best in our division. I have a lot of upcoming challenges, especially with PCO at Under Siege on May 26th in London, Ontario, which I'm looking forward to. And then also this weekend at the Spring Slugfest in Chicago, Friday and Saturday. I don't know who's going to step up. I know I have a target on my chest. That's why it says front towards enemy. I have that there for a reason, just because I always try to treat it like my back's against the wall. And that's what my focus is on right now.
Absolutely. I agree. You mentioned about May 26th at Under Siege. You're defending that world title against PCO in London, Ontario. You and I both know PCO is not right in the head, and he hasn't been right in the head for quite some time. So, how do you approach that match with what a lot of people call the Frankenstein of pro wrestling?
No, I've beaten him before, and I also approach it where I'm not right in the head either. I am a Marine and I'm a pro wrestler. So you mix those two hand in hand, especially being a grunt, we kind of put our minds at the risk. And I usually adapt to the situations. But again, I've beaten him before, and I'll figure it out this time as well.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, so you've got the event this weekend in Chicago, Spring Slugfest. It's Impact Wrestling for ticket, impactwrestling.com for tickets, rather. It'll be Friday and Saturday. And you mentioned you're waiting for somebody to step up. Is there someone that you have kind of an eye on as to you'd like to face them in the ring?
When Josh Alexander is healthy and comes back as the longest reigning Impact World Champion that had to vacate it due to injury, that is the man that I'm challenging. That is the man I'm looking forward to. So my goal is to hold on to this title as long as possible until he is healthy, and that's the matchup I want. And I think that's the matchup everybody wants in Impact Wrestling to see. It was kind of taken from us. Things happen in this business, but I think it's made for a better story in the long run.
Yeah, I agree. And Josh Alexander, a fantastic world champion. He sure was. By the way, if you want to, Impact Wrestling is selling a Chicago season pass, not only for this weekend, but you have an event in July in Chicago, as well as Bound for Glory in October. So again, impactwrestling.com for tickets. Steve, I just want to finish up with this. As a world champion, you've got again, all comers coming at you. You mentioned that bullseye on your back. I know it's very early. It's again, barely a week, but how would you characterize what you see this title run as being?
One day at a time. That's how you got to take it. And that's how I've taken my career, especially with getting into Impact, is one day at a time, one match at a time. The only match I can worry about is the one that's in front of me, and that's PCO as of right now at Under Siege, which I'm very much looking forward to in London, Ontario, because I know they love me up in Canada. So it's that's kind of my outlook for this. But I think ultimately it's going to come down to when Josh Alexander is healthy and he does come back. That's the true test. But then also with Multiverse 2 coming up in August in Philadelphia, for whom the bell tolls with New Japan, there's a lot of eyes for New Japan after I beat Kushida, who's one of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be, and you just mentioned Multiverse United 2. New Japan Pro Wrestling, they're going to be busy not only with that event, but you got Forbidden Door with AEW. I'll end with this one. Is there another New Japan talent that you would like to face in the ring? Right now, you got Sonata, who's the IWGP World Champion. You got several though that are just chomping at the bit to win a world title, and if it's an Impact World title, so be it.
I'll go after Kenta. Kenta's my number one right now.
Okay.
He's on my list for a long time, and of a matchup that I wanted, and I even asked for the last Multiverse. That didn't happen, so hopefully it happens at this one.
All right, that should be a fun one. Kenta and Steve Maclin. He is Steve Maclin. Follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Steve Maclin. He is the new Impact Wrestling World Champion. Steve, man, it's great to talk to you. Again, huge amount of respect for you, bud. Again, from one vet to another, thank you for your service. Thank you for your time here. Appreciate it, and all the best to you going forward.
No, thank you for having me on and appreciate it. And again, impactwrestlingtickets.com for Chicago Spring Slugfest this Friday and Saturday. And then we have, again, Under Siege in London, Ontario, May 26th. Follow me at Steve Maclin at Twitter and Instagram, as you said earlier. And then Pro Wrestling Tees, Steve Maclin Store, and Shop Impact deals for Steve Maclin Store as well.
There we go. I love the front towards the enemy shirt, by the way. Makes me think of those old Claymore mine drills that we used to run way back in the day.
That's my homage to my unit. That was actually 2-8's motto for 2009 through 2011. I think they still have them now. I know the hoodies get made and the T-shirts too, but that was our unit's motto. So that was my homage to respect to my brothers.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you.